My name is Andy Amalfitano, and it's my honor to serve as Dean of the MSU College of Osteopathic Medicine, as well to welcome you tonight to the 23rd Annual Dr. William G. Anderson Lecture Series, Slavery to Freedom, An American Odyssey. Welcome. We're going to have a few people still trickling in, but we thought we might as well begin our lecture tonight. I'd like to begin by extending our gratitude to the numerous sponsors who have helped make this year's series possible. From the many MSU college and unit sponsors to the community organizations and corporate sponsors, this is a truly collaborative event. I'd like you to see the brochures and web pages for the complete list of sponsors. We also had some of them posted here. We hope you'll make a point to acknowledge them for helping us bring our thought-provoking speakers to East Lansing these year after year. The dialogues that occur as a part of this series foster important historical and cultural reflections about the contributions of African Americans in this country. As many of you know, Dr. William G. Anderson led our college in establishing this lecture series. Dr. Anderson, his wife Norma, Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy were integral in the Albany movement, one of the most important civil rights struggles in the United States. We're indebted to Dr. Anderson for his sacrifices during the civil rights movement and as a trailblazer in the osteopathic medical profession, and for his efforts and passion to make Slavery to Freedom the distinguished lecture series has become. And we're honored we have Dr. Anderson in the house. Can we have a round of applause? Dr. Anderson. Thanks, Chief. Following in his and that legacy, I also want to highlight our Associate Dean for Diversity and Campus Inclusion, Dr. Marita Gilbert. Yes. Dr. Gilbert and her team are working tirelessly to assist not only the MSU College of Osteopathic Medicine, but the greater university in becoming places of inclusive excellence. And we thank her for those ongoing efforts. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the podium over to Dr. Gilbert.
Okay, y'all are stale. Y'all are stale. Y'all are stale. So what I'm gonna do, thank you, Troy. We're gonna go through some housekeeping, and then we're gonna let them try this again. Okay? All right, so hello and welcome. You now have your 5-minute warning to turn up time. Okay. All right, so I, as you can tell, am very glad to be here with you. I'm glad to see all of you family here in person after 3 years. Yes, you can clap for that. And I am glad to be joined by our family virtually. So to those of you watching us being live streamed, hello and welcome to you as well. All right, so a couple of items of housekeeping. We are going to be at capacity. We still have some folks downstairs waiting to get in. So where you are sitting, except for Phoenix, if you are sitting in a row and there are empty seats, I need you to scoot all the way over until you have a seat buddy, someone sitting next to you. We are going to need every single seat in this room. Okay? All right. All right. As a reminder, there will be no photo or video during Dr. Davis's presentation. Okay? So all of our cell phones need to be in our pockets, under our legs, in our bags. Got it. Okay, so last week we had the test run of making sure folks had cue cards so you could have questions for our speakers. Our ushers, if you do not have cue cards, our ushers, hey, Dr. Caldwell. If you do not, our ushers have cue cards and they will pass them out. Feel free to jot down your questions When we have about our last question, I will remind you that if you want to ask Dr. Davis a question, to please jot it down and hand it to the ushers. We will have someone go through them, and then we will have a question and answer period. All right. Now, I think y'all might be ready for turn-up time. Y'all ready for turn-up time? Okay. We getting warmer, y'all, not quite to there yet. So, what I'm gonna tell y'all is, right now, everybody get loose. Y'all can stand on up. You can two-step, y'all can gritty, whatever y'all wanna do. We are about to create a moment of Black joy in here, okay? All right. Y'all ready? I don't see y'all moving, so we need to get some standing up happening. We gonna turn up for 1 minute of Black joy. Somebody at your job might have said the wrong thing to you today. You might have got rained on trying to get in here. Your child might have been acting up, but we about to let all of that go and have 1 minute of Black joy. Y'all ready? Y'all getting warmer, we not quite ready. Y'all ready? Troy, are you ready? Let's go.
I'ma keep on running, cause the winner don't quit on themselves.
All right. Listen. Sometimes you have to create your own party. As y'all see, I do this for myself all the time. But I just felt like there was a reminder I had earlier today. A poet, Lucille Clifton. Yes. Said, "Come, won't you come celebrate with me that every day, something has tried to kill me and failed." So when I tell y'all that sometimes you just need to create that 1 minute, that 1 minute of joy for yourself, I'm telling you, it'll change your life. Give thanks. I think we're ready now. Okay, I'm going to invite Dr. Red Dog Sina, who is Associate Professor of Osteopathic Manipulative Medicine and the Vice Chair of our DEI Committee, to the stage so that he can read our land acknowledgement. And following Dr. Sina, y'all are in for a treat. Music performance student Phoenix Miranda will sing Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Ani. Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe peoples, the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize Michigan's 12 federally recognized Native nations, historic indigenous communities in Michigan, indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. and that's a good start. What we've learned over the last few years is that there are all kinds of oppression. And when we join forces, we are much stronger.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
So, my gratitude to Dr. Sina for reading the land acknowledgement. And thank you, as always, Phoenix, for blessing us with your gift again. All right. So I want to thank you all again for being here with us this evening in person or by Zoom. Thank you for joining us for the 23rd, 23 years of the Dr. William G. Anderson Lecture Series, Slavery to Freedom, An American Odyssey. So, how many of you were here last week? Yes. Thank you, thank you. Last week, we were joined by Marley Dias, creator of the 1000 Black Girl Books. There is still time to purchase books and to donate new books that feature Black girls as the central character. If you brought a book tonight, as promised, you'll receive a coupon for a sweet treat at Sweet Encounter Bakery in Lansing. If you would like to purchase books, you can see Nichelle Lawrence, who I believe is still outside. And she can help you to be able to donate books. So while I am on that theme, I want to thank some folks who came to hang out with myself and Nichelle at the Socialite Society, and they handpicked some Black girl books for our donation. So thank you to all of my friends that came to hang out with me, the MSU football team. I want to thank you very much. Hey. I want to thank Coach Tucker. I want to thank all of the coaching staff, Dr. Ashley Baker and A.D. Allen Holler, and especially a big, big thanks to Darian Harris. Thank you so much, Darian. Thank you for your donation, and thanks for just showing up. So The College of Osteopathic Medicine has provided this series for 23 years, giving all of those in our community the opportunity to hear and engage with iconic leaders of U.S. freedom movements. This series provides us an opportunity to reflect on the richness of our histories, our herstories, and together move forward to improve the world in which we live. But tonight, we welcome Dr. Angela Y. Davis. So Dr. Davis is a well-known scholar and activist who over many decades has been deeply involved in the social justice movement around the world. Dr. Davis is an educator at the university level and as a public intellectual. Her work emphasizes the importance of building communities of struggle for economic, racial, and gender justice. Dr. Davis is the author of 11 books, including Abolition Feminism Now, which she co-authored with Gina Dent, Erica Miners, and Beth Ritchie. There's also a new edition of her autobiography, which was recently released. Known for helping to popularize the notion of the prison industrial complex, Dr. Davis urges others to think seriously about the future possibility of a world without carceral systems and to help forge yeah, y'all ready. And she encourages us to help forge a 21st century abolition movement. Please give a warm Spartan welcome to the Dr. Angela Y. Davis. I think they're ready for you now. So, I'm going to give y'all a moment to catch your breath. It is so good to have you here at Michigan State University. We're glad for the College of Osteopathic Medicine to host you tonight. And so I'm going to just jump right in, if you don't mind. If that's okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
Good evening, everyone.
So, it is Black History Month, and this is a time to really think about and reflect on our Black histories, our Black herstories, but I think also to think about and develop strategies for Black futures, right? So, I like to start by asking you to share with us who are some of the ancestors, the trailblazers, those people that really influenced your life, impacted your work.
May I say something else
Yes,
before
you
I
may.
answer that question?
Yes.
A comment about the significance of Black history. Because too frequently the assumption is that Black history is only about Black people.
That's right.
And that it is Black people who are the only ones who have a stake in Black history, past, present, and future. And I think that it is important to celebrate Black history precisely because we're talking about the history of a struggle for freedom that has spanned centuries. And anyone who loves freedom should celebrate Black History Month.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe I'll say a little bit more about that later, because I have a tendency to go on and on. You know, I'm used to lecturing, but...
It's okay, we're here for you.
But who are some of the people who have influenced me? Well, of course, first my parents. And I am forever grateful to both my mother and father for teaching me how to love learning. Teaching me, I learned how to read when I was not yet 3 years old, because my mother was a reading teacher. And so from the time I was very young, she urged me to understand the importance of knowledge, and also the relationship between knowledge and liberation. My father was also a teacher, and he was an Episcopalian lay reader. So my father wanted me to learn Latin. I didn't do too well in that respect.
Okay.
But he did give me a love for words, especially those that had Latin derivation. Usually I don't talk about my father. Usually I talk about my mother, because she's the one who had the activist history. She was involved in an organization called the Southern Negro Youth Congress. Have any of you heard of the Southern Negro Youth Congress? It is actually referred to as the first SNCC. But a lot of people aren't aware of it because it was founded by a number of black communists. And so now, as a consequence of the impact of the McCarthy era and the anti-communism, now scholars are just beginning to do the work that will allow us to understand how people like Dorothy Burnham, whom I saw 2 days ago in Boston, who was my mother's best friend, who was turning 108 in March. And Esther Cooper Jackson, who just recently died last year, just after her 105th birthday. And so both of them were in the leadership of the Southern Negro Youth Congress, the national leadership. And my mother was in the local leadership in Birmingham, Alabama. And that's a very important story, which I hope some of you will pursue, Southern Negro Youth Congress. I just realized that when I was, I think, 2 years old or 3 years old, my mother attended a conference in Columbia, South Carolina, of the Southern Negro Youth Congress, addressed by W.E.B. Du Bois. And he gave this oration there, which you can find online. It's called Behold the Land. So, yeah. Read the speech. It's really amazing.
So Professor Davis has given us a homework assignment, yes? Okay. All right. I would like...
But, you know, I also want to say...
Yes, sir. Sit on back.
I mean, I've mentioned people who were very important to me in my formative era. And I also had the good fortune to be mentored by a man whose name was Herbert Marcuse, a German, Jewish, American philosopher, who taught me that it was possible for those with an interest in ideas and philosophy more broadly to use philosophy as one of the important tools for revolutionary change. And that is when I think I discovered what it was I wanted to do.
So can I tell you a story? I was speaking at a conference in Berlin, and I had just finished giving my talk, and there was a gentleman sitting in the front row, and he came and said, "You did a great job." I had never seen him before in my life. "You did a great job." I said, "Oh, okay, thanks." And he talked to me and asked me about key points from my talk. And he says, "Hi, well, my name is Peter." And I had no idea. So I was talking to my dissertation advisor later, and I said, oh yeah, so this guy, Peter Marcuse, came up to us. She was like, what? He's the son of Angela Davis's dissertation advisor. And so that is how that conference went. But he was lovely.
And unfortunately, Peter
Just died.
Just recently died.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about something that is very important to you, but we don't often talk about it in connection with Black History Month or freedom movements. And I want to talk about environmental justice. So I think I really wanted to intentionally start there, right? Especially given the fact that we're now having more deadly and more frequent weather events, deadly storms, water pollution, air pollution, and all of these things are disproportionately affecting Black people, people of color, those with less economic earning power. So if you would, could you talk to us about why environmental justice should be a freedom movement that we're paying attention to?
Well, I'm so glad you chose to begin with what is, I think, ground zero of all social justice movements. Because, of course, if we cannot manage to save this planet, then what difference will it make if we make strides in other areas? And this is a topic about which we could speak for the remainder of the evening. But I would like to say that we often fail to recognize that racism, that is colonialism and slavery, are at the very heart of capitalism, which is responsible for this horrendous predicament. We humans and our non-human co-inhabitants of this planet, as well as all of the other living things, face today. Oftentimes we think of environmental justice as the recognition of the fact that Black people, indigenous people, people of color, poor people are the primary targets of the chemical and other forms of pollution on this planet. But I think it's important, especially since this series bears the title From Slavery to Freedom, to recognize that slavery is at the very heart of the processes that have brought us to this moment. And if we think about the way in which the whole notion of the great chain of being, creates this hierarchy among all living things, and humans are at the top of the hierarchy, of course, and then there's what's called the animal kingdom, although we're animals as well, and we're not, I don't think, even the most intelligent animals. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that the conditions of possibility of destroying this planet are the same conditions that enable the development of colonialism and assaults on indigenous people and racism. It's not just that people of color live in places that are more affected by assaults on the environment. It is that racism is at the very heart of the processes that have led to this horrendous failure to recognize that we have a duty to preserve this planet on which we live. As a matter of fact, I think sometimes ants are smarter than human beings, because ants make, I mean, have you seen some of the amazing architectural edifices that ants make? And they do all of this incredible work, but they don't destroy the earth. Whereas virtually everything that humans have created has been predicated on the complete dismissal of what the consequences might be for the planet. And let me just say one other thing. I mentioned the great chain of being, which places humans at the apex. But it's not just humans, it's white humans. Because we have to keep in mind that the very notion of the human has been polluted by racism from the outset. And this is why black people have had to wage this ongoing freedom struggle for so many decades. But just two other minor points.
Sure.
And that is, there was an activist by the name of Damu Smith, with whom I worked in the 1970s and the 1980s on campaigns to free political prisoners, with an organization that was formed in the aftermath of my own acquittal, which was called the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. Damu Smith also created the first organization that called upon black people and other people of color to be more attentive to environmental issues. And Reverend Ben Chavis, who was in prison, and the Alliance managed to free him after many years. I think it was a struggle that went on for 7 or 8 years. He is the person who coined the term environmental justice. So there are these moments in our struggles for freedom in which in which there's been enlightenment about the connection. But I don't think that, and I'm also very self-critical, because I realize now that I should have paid far more attention to these ideas than I did then. But I'm trying to make up for it now.
Okay. All right. All right. So you are often described as being a true revolutionary, right? So I wonder if you would describe yourself in that way. And then I'd like to ask you, what does being a revolutionary mean to you?
Well, I don't think of myself as a true revolutionary.
Okay. Talk to him.
But I try to be a revolutionary. I try to join others, because I don't think it's a question about who or what an individual is. We fixate too much on individuals, and we deflect the accomplishments of organizations and groups and collectives and onto single individuals, because we're apparently we can't understand a development unless it is created by, founded by, led by a single individual. And that prevents us from understanding how the world works. It prevents us from understanding that we ourselves are products of community.
Yes.
And that we would not be who we are outside of the relationality with others.
Yes.
And so this is a time when we also find ourselves celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King, and I think that's great.
Right.
But we should also recognize that Dr. King was not the only figure
That's right.
in
That's
that
right.
movement.
That's right.
that, as a matter of fact, if you really want to know who's responsible for the fact that's what we now call the civil rights movement evolved as it did, then you would have to talk about black women.
That's right. That's right.
And in many instances, you would have to talk about black women whose names you can't even retrieve. You would have to talk about poor black women. You would have to talk about
Yes.
black women who were domestic workers.
That's right.
You know, who were the ones who made it possible for the Montgomery bus boycott to be victorious. So no, I'm not a true revolutionary.
Okay.
But,
I was going to let you walk around in that question a little bit longer.
but I have tried all my life to, from the time I was very young, from the time my mother told me that segregation was wrong and it was not supposed to exist. She said to us, I don't know how many times, this is not the way things are supposed to be, and you have to change them. And I've been trying to do that.
Yes.
And, you know, hopefully, I have been successful, not as an individual, but as a member of an organization, of a
Yes.
group, of a collective, of a committee, or whatever.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to take my time with this question. Only a few days ago, Tyree Nichols was funeralized. And just days prior, video was released of the state violence that took his life. So we are again confronted by police involved in violence against Black people. In this particular case, all of the officers looked like Tyree Nichols, right? But again, in this case, culminating in tragic loss of life, it is now for us this familiar kind of refrain, right? So we have state violence, tragedy, we have these surveillance technologies, and over and over and over again. My question for you centers around this. So your voluminous body of scholarship on state violence, and certainly your keen critical perspectives at the intersections of that violence and its aesthetic productions, really leads me to invite you to comment on how you might frame the persistence of state violence today, along with its many actors and productions.
That's a huge question. But I do think it is important that we acknowledge the trajectory of state violence. It's racist foundations, and that we would not have the kinds of police forces that we have today were it not for the fact that slavery existed. And
That's right.
slave patrols. You know, we often think of our existence as primarily conditioned by what is happening now. And this kind of presentism is, I think, a consequence of the kinds of ideologies that are enabled by capitalism. So I want to say that first.
Sure.
Because too frequently we don't acknowledge capitalism. And you know, even though, of course, we're all complicit to a certain extent in a capitalist system that is based on exploitation, that is founded on racism. So capitalism is really racial capitalism, and this is the term you hear used ever more frequently during this period. So I think that we have to attempt to reflect on how we have been produced by history, and that something like the police, an institution that too many people have just taken for granted until recently. I think it's the whole notion of policing has been troubled as a consequence of the activism around racist police violence in the recent period. And not only the recent period, as a matter of fact, I could talk about the ways in which I could trace my entire life in relation to the cases of racist police violence. And here we are now, and many people were shocked that Tyree Nichols was killed by black cops, because the assumption has frequently been that all you need to do is to make sure police live in the communities that they police, represent their communities, and everything will be fine. I assume all of those guys live in the community. But the most important point is that racism is structural.
That's right.
It's institutional. It's systemic. It's not about white people not liking black people or indigenous people. Of course, that's a problem, but that is not what it's about foundationally. As a matter of fact, in South Africa, during the time we were demonstrating in support of those who called for defunding the police in the aftermath of the police lynching of George Floyd and the police killing of Breonna Taylor and all of the others that happened during the pandemic, black South Africans were demonstrating against the racism of the police department in South Africa, even though virtually all of the actors are black. So it's about the structures, the inheritances, and even though virtually all of the leadership and the police in South Africa are black or perhaps Asian, the machines work in the same way they did before. They reflect apartheid. And I think we're finally beginning to realize that although it seemed that in the media they were reluctant at first to talk about the fact that the cops were black, because that didn't quite fit. The assumption is that black is black and white is white, and that is what racism has done to us. And in many ways, all of us are implicated in racism. Black people engage in racism all the time. Especially, well, maybe I shouldn't start naming names.
Okay. Okay.
But I can talk about black individuals who have been important enablers.
That's right.
Of racism in so many different respects. Racism is an ideology. Racism is a system. And don't assume that all you have to do is change the race of the actors and everything changes. No, it's never been about that.
Right.
We have to transform in a revolutionary manner the way in which these institutions work. I mean, this is why diversity by itself doesn't really make sense. I mean, I think diversity is important, but a strong approach to diversity that also includes justice
Yes.
and also includes transformation. But if all you want to do is bring those into the circle who have been expelled from the circle, and the system itself, the university, oops, did I say university? The university itself continues to function as it functioned before, nothing has changed.
Nothing changes. That was a word. So you have been fighting for decades to combat all forms of oppression. And I love when I hear you speaking, you talk about fighting all forms of oppression. One of your books is titled, Freedom is a Constant Struggle. As our freedom struggles press on, what would it mean for freedom movements and justice workers to be as agile and adaptable, to have that malleability to shift as quickly as the changing tactics of oppression?
Well, you know, I think that we have witnessed at least something of that kind of transformation that embodies the complexity that allows us to recognize that even as we struggle for freedom, we become aware of other ways in which freedom might manifest itself. And if you take into consideration that even though we have not managed to accomplish the structural transformations that are absolutely necessary, we have come a long way. We've come a long, long
Yes.
way. And I think that, that we should celebrate those victories that sometimes appear to be minor victories. But when we come to recognize that when you're talking about black freedom, you can't use the same vocabulary that was used in the 19th century, that was used at the beginning of the 20th century, that was very masculinist,
Yes.
and that assumed that black people would be free when the black man was free.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's an important insight.
yes.
And then, of course, we then recognize that you can't simply talk about gender in terms of the kind of, in terms of a binary. And you have to recognize that there are many more expressions of gender that are included in that binary formation, male and female. You know, so then we begin to realize that we have to incorporate into our sense of what it means to struggle for freedom a constant campaign and struggle against the gender binary. And I could go on, but I could go on. But the point that I'm making is that through the very process of struggling for freedom, we become aware that the notion of freedom is so much more capacious than we could have ever imagined. And I assume that this process is going to continue. That we not only, talk about all of the issues that we are accustomed to including in a discussion of social movements today, but there are going to be more. I mean, we began to talk about environmental issues, and we still haven't succeeded in incorporating environmental issues into our notion of what it means to be free.
Yes.
And there are, of course, some humans who are still left out of the circle of struggling for freedom. Palestinians, for example. And, I'm very happy, I'm very proud that I come from California sometimes. And California now has a high school ethnic studies curriculum, especially considering what's going on in Florida and a lot of other places. But guess who got expelled from that curriculum? Palestinians. So, yeah, I think that we have to be aware of the ever increasing complexity of our sense of what it means to be free, and that's the kind of epistemological dimension of struggles for freedom. And I'll stop there because
I was like, yes, please go ahead.
okay.
Sometimes I forget that I'm actually the moderator. I'm like, yeah. Oh, right, it's my turn. It's my turn. So as we discuss freedom movements, past, present, and future, it feels appropriate to discuss abolition. And I really want to give you a chance to talk about your own perspective, right? Your work extraordinarily offers insightful ways of understanding the carceral state and beyond. And I think the beyond is the important part. So from Are Prisons Obsolete to Abolition Democracy to your recent co-authored book, Abolition, Feminism Now, you really challenge us to conceive of a future world beyond what is facing us right now in our present. And you challenge us to think about what we might jettison and build differently, right? What is the new thing that we can imagine, create, develop? My question for you is, in your own words, could you discuss the abolition movement in whatever manner is salient to you at this moment?
Well, first of all, again, I have to point out that all of these insights came as a consequence of being involved in struggles and conversations and efforts to make sense of processes and developments that seem to bear no fruit. As a matter of fact, I first heard the term abolition in relation to prisons when I was in jail. And it came from people who were in prison themselves. As a matter of fact, it came in the context of the 1971 Attica Rebellion. And so that is when I first began to think, as a consequence of what my brothers in Attica were saying, that, and as a result of conversations with people like George Jackson, who was in prison at the time as well, who had already helped me to think about looking at the institution of the prison not simply as something that, an institution that existed that was terrible, that we had to, rescue human lives from, but recognizing that the institution of the prison was foundational to the way in which racism shaped our society. So it wasn't just about people who were in prison. It was also about the impact that that institution has on all of us. It took me a very long time and many conversations with many, many people. I should say it took us, because I've always tried to help shape these ideas with other people. It was in 1998 1996, as a matter of fact, that a group of us in Oakland, California, began to meet to talk about what we could do to help generate a movement that would shed light on the terrible developments within prisons and jails. At that time, I can't remember exactly how many people, what the statistics revealed about the populations in prison at that time, but I do remember that we were waiting for the 1 million mark. And nobody was saying anything. It seemed, as a matter of fact, no one wanted to engage in, when I say no one, I'm talking about those who control public discourse, right? No one wanted to engage in conversations about what was happening in the prisons in this country, and the fact that it was people of color who constituted the overwhelming majority, and the fact that indigenous people have had and still have a greater proportion of people in prison per capita than any other population. And so the 1 million mark happened, and then later the 2 million mark happened.
Yeah.
And we were trying to encourage people to think about what might be done. But we did have we knew about abolition because there were organizations in other parts of the world that were legal organizations of philosophers who were thinking about prison penal abolition. But we just wanted to start a conversation.
Yeah.
And therefore we decided to use a term that Mike Davis had used in his writing, and he just recently died as well, and is an amazing scholar, activist. And he had talked about the shifting of the California economy from an agricultural economy to a prison-based economy. And in this article that he wrote, which I think was published in The Guardian, he used the term prison industrial complex. And so we said, aha, this is precisely what we need to try to popularize. And we ended up having a conference in September of 1998 that was called Critical Resistance Beyond the Prison Industrial Complex. Critical resistance because we thought that resistance was critical at that point, but also we wanted people to have a critical attitude, toward the work. In any event, that conference happened, and we thought perhaps if we were successful, there would be 200 or 300 people there. 3,500 people showed up.
Yeah.
And we realized that there were all of these conversations
That's right.
happening among activists that were not being linked. And so that was the beginning of a very explicit campaign to urge people to what we call disarticulate crime and punishment. That punishment does not express this kind of, or it's not in a causal relationship to crime. Everybody knows, do the crime. Exactly. So we wanted to point out that people are in prison not so much because they've committed crimes, even though some people have whatever, crime is socially constructed. So that's a long conversation. But even so many people commit crimes. Almost everybody has committed a crime. And look at the people who are actually in prison. So we said we have to re-articulate punishment with racism, with class exploitation and look at all of the reasons why people actually end up in prison. And in the context of doing that work, we realized that we had created the foundation for a more explicit, all of us were abolitionists, by the way, but we didn't think that, you know, people would be accepting of, as a matter of fact, I can remember Henry Louis Gates, Skip Gates, came to it, or he invited me to come and speak at Harlem, at Harvard, and I spoke about abolition. And afterwards he said, you know, you must be crazy. He said, like, girl, you're crazy. You think anybody? And more recently, he said, I see what you meant. Especially after he himself got arrested, right? But I'll say finally that we had no idea that abolition would become a part of the discourse, popular discourse. We imagine ourselves as creating the foundation for work that would happen long after we were gone. So in the summer of 2020, it was a real, it was a shock, but at the same time, it was precisely the evidence that we needed to be able to understand how the work that you do, even when you think it may not have any immediate impact, can be world-changing.
Thank you.
You never know. You never know. And so you have to do the work as if the kind of conjuncture that emerged during the COVID pandemic might happen, so that you can be prepared to take advantage.
Thank you for that. Thank you. So when I was preparing to see you, I asked people about the themes, the topics that they thought we should talk about, and so we've covered some of those previously, but this last question is my own. So I will share with you that I love Toni Morrison. I love her present tense. I was talking with one of my close friends, and we were talking night before last, and we said, you know, Toni got us through some really difficult times. And we just started talking about those and naming those. And one of the things, I love many things about your work. One of the things I love personally about you is I've watched your friendship with Toni Morrison. And I love the way that you loved her and you honored her. So there was a time when a bunch of you writers got together. I think you called it Sheer Good Fortune, just to honor her. And I had a chance to watch what that looked like. So I got to see you and Nikki Giovanni and Rita Dove and India Ari and others just love on her. And it was so delicious to me just to watch and to see your sisterhood and friendship. And so that's not a question. There wasn't a question there.
Yeah, we read our favorite passages from her work.
Yes, it was so, I describe it as delicious. I savored every moment because I saw each of you take different pieces of her work and come together. And I loved to watch her reaction, right? For her to have her flowers in that moment. And it was another intergenerational moment, so I loved everything about that. That wasn't a question. I just thought if I ever had a chance to see you, I was going to tell you that I love the way that you loved on Toni Morrison. So the other...
Well,
go ahead.
May I say something?
Yeah. We can stay here.
You know, because oftentimes we fail to make the connections between the kind of work beautiful writing that, I mean, Toni taught us who we are.
Yes, yes.
And that it was okay for black people to represent themselves
Yes,
without
yes.
having to think about what white people,
Right.
how white people would respond. But in the process of doing that, she reached the kind of universality and the kind of appeal to all people, regardless of racial background. But that's not what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say was that Toni saw herself as organically connected to this movement that we're referring to. And, you know, I met her because she came to me after I got out of jail and asked me to write an autobiography.
Yes.
And I was like 28 years old. So I kind of looked at her like she was crazy, you know. I shouldn't be using the term crazy. I have to be aware of, you know, the ways in which the ideologies around disability have, so. But anyway, she persuaded me to write this book, which I didn't think I was capable of writing, or I didn't even think I should write. I didn't even think it was meaningful. But she taught me that I could write an autobiography that was a collective autobiography. Now, that's not the point that I wanted to make. The point that I wanted to make is that I did not realize until many years later that that was her project, to create a historical record of the black movement.
Yes.
And of course, she was the only only black woman editor, but she was the only black editor at a major publishing company at that time. And so she got people like Muhammad Ali to write his autobiography. She published all of these amazing black women who never would have found a way to put their work out there. Toni Cade Bambara, you know, for example. And so at one point, she said, when she was doing an interview, I think it was with Timothy Greenfield for the documentary, this wonderful documentary, The Pieces That I Am. That, you know, she knew she wasn't the kind of person who would spend her time marching and organizing and doing the stuff that, you know, activists, what you usually consider activists do. But she nevertheless wanted to make her contributions to the movement. And as a matter of fact, if you read the essay that she has in The House That Race Built, she points out that she could be so much more effective in enabling the development of a black freedom movement if she did it through the ways in which if she did it with her own gifts and what she loved to do, which was writing. And so she saw herself as a soldier doing that work, and at the same time reminding us that when black people have engaged in struggle, it's not only, as you said before, about the oppression and the violence, it's also about joy.
Yes.
It's also about creating beauty.
Yes.
And that is what I think is what is so important about black history as well. An argument why we should all be interested in black history. I miss her so much.
Me too.
You know, every time I go to New York, Because I used to go to New York to see her, especially during the last years when she wasn't doing well, as often as I could. And I never go to New York now without thinking, oh, I need to go visit Tony.
Yeah, yeah. I think of both of you. Oh, I've never said this in public. I think of both of you as my aunties in my head. And so I will tell you that I watched the pieces I Am the weekend that the world was protesting. And there was something so steadying about hearing not just her voice, but her words and the hope that she had. And so I thank you for that. I think the other thing that I would say about both of you is what I saw is you all love Black women. And not for me to get in trouble, but I did have AP English teachers. I had an 8th grade teacher that introduced us to Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston, and then I had an AP English teacher that reinforced that. And it really gave me a foundation to walk into the world where I saw myself first. And I could look at myself with my own gaze. And so when you talk about missing her, I think that is one of the things that I miss. So I would love to open it up for, go ahead, tell it to who? Oh, yeah, he shall not be
College
named.
Board.
Yes, yes. So I want to give you all a chance to share questions. If you have written them on your cards, please feel free to hand them to the ushers and our volunteers. They're going to sort through them. I will share with you in full transparency that we are still fighting 3 respiratory diseases, so we will not have you come to microphones. We will have, one of our medical students will sort through the questions and will ask questions of Dr. Davis. So while we're doing that, and I know it's going to be a hard question to do quickly, but since we've talked about that, this idea of banning, canceling books, literature, ideas that are history, right? If you could just talk a little bit about that. I'll just let you go with that.
I haven't used the term fascism, I don't think. But that is precisely, what fascism desires, that we not think for ourselves. Now, in terms of banning, I'm sitting up here looking at this bottle of water in plastic, and we started the conversation talking about environmental justice.
Right.
And, I felt thirsty, and I looked, and I said,
No.
well, I have to drink out of this plastic bottle and therefore participate in the pollution of the ocean because this stuff will not break down for thousands of years or whatever it is. Yeah, we should ban the things that need to be banned. But also, there's a reason why this is happening at this moment. And that is because there are those who want to counteract the ways in which vast numbers of people in this country, of all racial and ethnic backgrounds, have acquired a new way of thinking about such issues as racism. And this happened before. This happened in the aftermath of slavery. And what did they do? There was that period that was so progressive.
Yes.
up until between 1867 and 1877. And then what happens in 1877? The counter-revolution. And that is what they are attempting to accomplish right now. They're trying to get rid of the progress that we made in terms of our collective consciousness, in terms of the ways in which we've come to think about racism and heteropatriarchy and all of these issues. And they know that you get rid of it at the level of education. It's very scary. It's very, very scary. But we have to stand up. We have to say no to these people. No to the book burners. They're scared of the fact that white kids are thinking differently
That's right.
than the generations that preceded them. And they're trying to make sure that we get back on track in terms of the old trajectory. All of you have to do whatever you can. Have conversations in your classrooms, wherever you are, point out that this is a period they're trying to create as the counter-revolution. That is what we're witnessing now.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's not just about race. It's not just about issues of racism and heteropatriarchy and all of that. It's about how people think.
Yes.
It's about ways of thinking or not thinking that prevent people from imagining a different future. It's about accepting that which exists as opposed to imagining possibilities of transformation and change.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we are going to have our questions. Ms. Terry, I don't see you, but if someone can make sure we got the questions from the chat, the Zoom questions as well, okay? So, perfect. We're gonna bring up, I think, the light so that you can see. Can we see you? I see their outline. I think it's Abril.
It is.
Okay. So one of our med students, Abril, will read questions for you.
Yes, okay. Well, hi, everyone. Like Dr. G said, my name is Abril. I'm a medical student at the College of Osteopathic Medicine. And I just have a couple questions here from the audience. The first one is, what would you say to people who claim that the urgency of the climate problem means that we don't have time to take justice concerns into consideration?
But the climate issue is an issue of justice.
It is a justice.
And, we're not people who don't know how to chew gum and walk at the same time. The whole feminist notion of intersectionality is designed to encourage us to think things together that we usually tend to think apart. I mean, that is why there's this long history of trying to show people that we can think race and gender together. That we can think. I wrote a book called Women, Race, and Class. Because I wanted to argue that we can't think about, if we think about gender by itself, it is going to be about whiteness. If we think about race by itself, it's going to be about men. So you have to learn, how to use intersectionality in this way that encourages us to think in more complicated ways, but they're not difficult.
That's right.
To think in more complicated ways does not mean you have to be a university professor. It does not mean you have to be a student at the university. As a matter of fact, that reflects the way things are in reality. And in many ways, it's simpler to think about the whole picture rather than, and this is what academics do, rather than analytically separate one thing from the other, and then you make the mistake of thinking that what you're looking at, your theoretical frame, that represents what exists in the world. The world is messy. The world is not neat like that. You can't think only about environmental justice.
Right.
And then over here, you think only about racial justice. Dr. King talked about the indivisibility of justice. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. So yeah, let's just do that. It's not that hard.
Okay. The second question also kind of hits that intersectionality, but what is the relationship between queerness and abolition, and why do you believe it's important for it to be discussed, especially during Black History Month?
What, can you repeat the first part? The difference.
The relationship between queerness and abolition.
Queerness.
Yes.
Well,
And abolition.
Abolition is also, an abolitionist approach is also about imagining the world differently from what the ideological paradigms urge us to do. So, one of the really wonderful things about this period, this will be an amazing historical period when people look back on it. And I don't think that those of us who are actually living it realize how earth-shaking changes have been. The fact that the Black movement that has so long been from, all the way from, Frederick Douglass to Dr. King, it's always been represented by these charismatic Black male figures. And then we have Black Lives Matter, and it's queer Black women who are in the forefront of Black Lives Matter. But not only that, but the whole notion of Black lives that gets presented to us is one that militates against the kind of universalism that has urged us to think about the human as a white male. So when you're talking about Black lives, there's this multiplicity of lives. They're disabled Black lives, they're queer Black lives, they're working class Black lives. And so I think the fact that you had this new movement incorporating all of the insights that have developed as a consequence of the movements, we begin to understand how you cannot separate one aspect of the movement from the other. If you believe in Black freedom, you believe in Black freedom for Black people who are a part of the LGBTQ community.
And then the last question is my own, but I think a lot of people would love to know too. You mentioned that fighting for freedom is a constant struggle. And so I was wondering if you had any advice for those of us who may at times, being part of the system, feel maybe worn down by being constantly advocating for ourselves and fighting for freedom.
Advocating and feel worn down, get weary.
Well, everybody gets tired. I mean, that's no big deal. Freedom is a constant struggle is the title of a freedom song.
Yeah.
And, it says, freedom is a constant dying. I've died so long, I must be free. Freedom is a constant moaning. I've moaned so long,
Yes.
I must be free. So it's, that song urges us to recognize that no matter how tired we feel, no matter how beat down we feel, we can still struggle for freedom. And, Audre Lorde pointed out that you don't have to be the perfect specimen of anything in order to do this work. You just do what you can. Even if you are so tired that you have to go to bed, you can still participate.
Yes.
You can still participate. Maybe it's about writing a poem or writing a song. We don't have to think about the battle for freedom as one in which everybody prepares in the same way to participate. It's not like the work that an army does. I think that we can use those metaphors, but it has to be an army that consists of people doing so many different kinds of things. People writing novels and painting and making films and music. I think it's music that is perhaps most central to the struggle for black freedom, and it is one of the reasons why we can say that this constant struggle has persisted for so many generations and for so many centuries. And this is, one of the critiques I have about a lot of the films that we see about slavery, that you only see people getting beaten and, it focuses on the violence. And you don't see those moments that people stole to regenerate themselves, to sing, to make music, to make beauty. And that is, it's not that that work resides and outside of the context of struggling for freedom. It's that work of feeling joy is so much a part of the struggle. Because you don't want people, angry and upset and complaining about how tired they are, being the figures that represent, what freedom. What freedom? I mean, I don't want that kind of freedom.
Worn out freedom.
So that is, it's a lot more, complicated, and it's a lot more beautiful than many people imagine. I'll tell you that a lot of people ask me if I'm not upset that we didn't achieve our goal. That people have written me and they said, after so many years and decades of being involved in the freedom movement, you must have many regrets that you devoted your life to something that never became a reality. And my response is always that even though we did not achieve what I assumed that we would, when I was younger, I thought the revolution was right around the corner. I mean, and I think you have to have those ideas, because otherwise you don't fight with the kind of urgency that you need to.
Yeah.
But then I always say, well, I'm actually now really glad that we didn't win what we thought we were fighting for, because we would have left so much out that it would not have been a revolution that I would have wanted to. Precisely because, as I've explained, you learn so much in the course of being involved in the struggle. You learn what it was you didn't realize. And I expect that that's going to continue for the rest of my life. I expect to continue to learn. And I have not an ounce of regret. I am so happy that I have devoted my life to this struggle, because I think it's the best kind of life I could have ever led.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I'm like fanning out up here.
Don't do it.
I'm Dr. Juanita Tooks. I'm an academic advisor with the College of Osteopathic Medicine. And really quick, I just want to say it's an honor to stand before you, Dr. Davis, because in my younger years, I was chosen to portray you in a play. And the director gave me a picture, and all I knew is I better hurry up and get this afro wig together, because my hair wasn't going to do you any justice. So I got the biggest afro I could find and got me some circle wire glasses. And the way that the director had me study you is what taught me about your work. And so this is a full circle moment for me, so it is an honor. The first question I have is, what is your perspective on the latest attack on Black history, labeling it critical race theory, and the desire to remove all Black history from schools? How can we respond, and what action should we take?
Hydrate.
Yeah, this is, and we've been using these military metaphors. This is the battlefield right now, and it is precisely because they are afraid of the difference in the way critical race theory, I mean, it really is an attack on critical race theory, but not in the way that most people think it, because, you know, kids don't learn critical race theory in school.
At all.
I mean, hopefully they learn some things that have been that have emerged out of the conversations that critical race theorists have encouraged, and that is, for example, the structural character of racism. And that is perhaps one of the most important contributions of critical race theory, urging us to think about the way, first in the law, because critical race theorists were legal theorists, and they were responding to the fact that there was a critical legal theory that developed, but that they did not attend to issues of race. So that to urge kids to think structurally about racism is a good thing, because you don't then impute certain attitudes to people by virtue of their racial or ethnic background. You realize it's about understanding ideology and the work that ideology does. And the work that ideology does is to persuade us that, that what is normal is what exists. And as a matter of fact, I think the more normal something appears to be, the more it is a product of ideology. So it's about encouraging people to think more deeply, not to take what exists for granted, not to assume that what exists today must exist now and forevermore. Which is the way we're supposed to think about capitalism, the way we're supposed to think about prisons, the way we're supposed to think about, all carceral systems. And so I think that it was really exciting that we seemed on the verge of, challenging the old ideologies that force people to make assumptions about issues of race and class and gender and sexuality. And in that context, this is I always like to make the point that the challenge to the gender binary has been so central. This is one of the reasons why they're so angry about the progress that is made in defense of trans and gender nonconforming people. Because that represents an overturning of that which has been considered absolutely normal. And if people can be led to think differently about the gender binary, that means that they can be led to think differently about a lot of other things, including capitalism. So I think that is the fear. That is the fear. And what we have to do is work against that attempt to produce this counter-revolution wherever we may be. In your conversations with people, in the classroom, in your work, whether it's artwork or music, we have to be able to defend where we are now if we want to be able to imagine a different kind of future, and especially a future without police as the primary guarantors of security and safety, because that will, so that just, I can't give you a list of things to do, but I want you to think creatively about what you can do in order to encourage people to think in a forward-looking way rather than return to an oppressive past, which is what they want us to do.
So Dr. Tooks, can I, in the interest of time, get Dr. Graham
Absolutely.
Atkin to
Thank you.
come next? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Graham. I'm a faculty person here. It's an honor, like Dr. Tooks, it's an honor to address you. Unlike Dr. Tooks, I did not portray you in a play. A fact of which I imagine we are both grateful.
That would have been great.
I have been asked to share 2 questions from the almost 400 online participants for this event. And so the first I would ask is whether you have recommendations for students at a university who want to get involved in activism and social movements.
Well, I would say that there's no right way to get involved. There's no one way, and there's no correct way. And as we were talking about Toni Morrison before, and the way in which she made a conscious decision to use her talents as a writer to promote social justice, I think that is the approach everyone should take. Find something that you love doing. Don't simply get involved because you think this is what you are expected to do, this is what you need to do, and then you end up being the person who has to go to all of the meetings, the 50 million meetings, and you hate meetings, and then maybe you'll be enthusiastic for a little while, but eventually you'll say, no, I can't do this. So find something that you love doing. whether it's intellectual work, whether it's physical work, whether it's organizing or writing I love thinking. And and so that was, it wasn't my first involvement in the movement. The first time it was with a discussion group. It was an interracial discussion group at my church. And then after we had a couple of meetings, the Ku Klux Klan came and burned the church. But I think everyone has to make an individual decision about something that they find fulfilling, and use your talents to promote a collective goal rather than only for the sake of getting a good job and making money and so forth. And so,
Thank you so much for that answer. Dr. Gilbert, do we have time for one more, or should we?
sure.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that there were three of you. I thought that there was only one,
Oh.
because it's kind of hard to see
Yeah,
with these
We are
lights.
frequently mistaken for each other. That happens all the time. The last question I have is freedom attainable in a capitalist society? I saved the best for last.
Well, no. But I want to discourage you from thinking about freedom as a discrete goal.
That's right.
I see freedom not so much as the destination, but rather as the journey itself. And because capitalism constitutes the context in which all of the conditions of our lives have been produced, we have to figure out how to both inhabit this terrible situation and to fight against capitalism. And you don't have to assume that it's going to be all one thing or something else. It's a process. And of course, if we had time, we could talk about the way in which Marx, am I talking about Karl Marx here? Argued that capitalism would produce the internal contradictions that would help to lead to its own demise. But this is not a mechanical process. It could also lead to something terribly unimaginable if we don't put human agency. And also, I don't want to be accused of being of speciesism, because I think that this is precisely the moment, given that we started talking about environmental justice, for us to think about how to incorporate campaigns to save the earth and to recognize the extent to which humans are responsible for the most unimaginable cruelty in relation to animals. So we have to figure out how to challenge that and how to make people feel and be empathetic. Would you want someone treating you the way cows are treated in order to provide material for McDonald's? I don't even want to pronounce the name. you know, and you know, I think that we can establish some ways of developing relations with others, some relational methods of encouraging people to think about the conditions that are required for them to exist. And to also imagine that the exploitation that exists on this planet as a consequence of capitalism affects all beings. I mean, I used to say that what we should develop we should rehearse some ways of being in the world, and just think for a moment about the fact that the clothes that you are wearing have been produced by humans, probably by girls in Asia or in Latin America, who are treated under the most oppressive kinds of conditions. To take note of that, even though we put the clothes on. And don't think, like I said, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. So we can be critical, even as we are compelled to be complicit. And that is what I think can move us in the direction of developing a more broader, more widespread critique of capitalism, because capitalism is destroying this planet, and I mean that's why Elon Musk. I do not like to mention his name, but others are now trying to figure out how to colonize other planets. That's why they're going out to space, because they know that this one isn't going to last that much longer. But we have to reverse that process, and it's our responsibility to all of the beings that inhabit this planet. So thank you that much.
You can stay right here. You can stay.
Can they bring the lights up? I have not
Yes.
been able to see a single person,
So-
so I would appreciate it if you would
Can
bring
we
the
bring
house
the
lights
lights
up.
up? Please, can we bring the, there, now you can see them.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Davis, we want to thank you for being a part of this series. We are so happy to host you. The artwork that you see on the screen was created by Detroit-based artist Darnell Kendricks, who is here somewhere. So in the interest of time, I'm not gonna have him come explain the piece here, but you are featured third from the left with your fist in the air. And so to thank you for being a part of the series, we wanted to give you a gift, which is the print of this piece. All right, so we're gonna do some things really quickly in the interest of time. I'm gonna say one really, really, really big thank you, because I know everybody is really ready to get to the book signing. We have a tribute as well from Dr. Brixey. We're gonna do that at the book signing. We're gonna get everybody out in the stanchions. We wanna thank all our partners. Thank you to Uno Deuce. Thank you again to the Wharton Center that managed this crowd beautifully, made sure that everything came together. So thank you to all the staff at the Wharton Center. All right, so next, no, that's not right. On February 23rd, we will have our final speaker, which will be Dr. Freeman Rabowski, also from Birmingham. And yes, you can come back if you want. Okay. And we will be in the Kellogg Center, all right? So on the 23rd, we'll be in the Kellogg Center. We're gonna ask that you all just kind of stay put for a couple seconds. The ushers are gonna take Dr. Davis and I out to the book signing area, and if we let y'all go out first, we'd never make it. So if you'll stay put for just a second, we're happy to host you all. There are folks, I know I didn't get to hug you before this, so I'm looking forward to seeing you. And we will see you just outside for the book signing. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you on the 23rd.